Hello, I'm Brian Sethurst in Los Angeles.
And welcome to the Story Hour.
The Story Hour sits at the intersection of storytelling and technology. We bring you the story behind the stories, how it's written, how it's produced, how it's distributed, and even the personal stories behind the storytellers themselves.
We talk with the master writers, producers, directors, authors, and technologists, covering it all from film and television to literature, virtual and augmented reality, and more, as well as the innovations in production, technology, and distribution that are changing the how of storytelling.
For over 20 years, our guests today have been pushing the boundaries of imagination to develop and produce immersive, interactive attractions for theme parks, museums, aquariums, and destinations of all kinds around the world. With extensive experience creating flying films, interactive character experiences, 4D attractions, and immersion tunnels.
These two co-founders, creatives, and experience designers recognize that the path from dream to reality may be different for every project, yet their mission remains the same: to uplift the spirit, touch the heart, and fuel the mind, with a whole brain creative process that considers the world of the experience, the story they want to tell in that world, and the role the guests play in that story.
Please welcome the co-founders of Super78 Studios, Dina Benedon and Brent Young.
Hi.
Hello,
Thanks,
you.
Brian. Thanks, Allison.
It's great to have you guys. You know, Allison and I have known you both for quite some time. And when we talk about what guests we want to have, we really want to cover the experience of storytelling and what the audience experiences. And on a personal note, when I decided to shift and go into virtual reality, I came to you guys because I knew that you already had the language of immersive entertainment and had that vocabulary. So I would like to go back and ask you how you got involved in themed entertainment and how Super 78 came about.
Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead, jump into it.
Well, we started in this industry 25 years ago, so it's been a long time. And, we started out making ride films for themed entertainment. And what we loved about that so much was the fact that, it would go through this extensive story development process through storyboards and kind of exactly the process of making a movie, only this was a 4-minute film. And it involved a lot of technology. It involved seat movement. It involved wind and all the 4D effects that we now know today. But back then it was very, very new. And so we really loved the idea of audiences being a part of the story. And so this is kind of how we met, was making these kinds of films. And then we launched our own studio in 1997 now, and got into, the animation aspect and really making the movies again. But eventually evolved into designing the attractions themselves and the experiences.
Yeah, so we always loved the creative, and Dina and I, again, we started off at a company called Rhythm and Hues that did a lot of visual effects and CG animation, if you remember, all the way back, Babe, Coca-Cola, Polar Bears, all those things. That was what we were doing at the time, and it was very cutting edge, and I think both of us were really attracted to the world of technology and art and that intersection between technology and art and storytelling. And there was nothing more on the cutting edge, because we were doing commercials in cinema that had conventions already baked in. These were the conventions. We were just doing this, augmentation of the film now through CG that nobody had seen before, like with Babe, where you had talking animals that were incredibly realistic and, Academy Award-winning project for the studio at the time. But I think again, Dina and I, what she mentioned, we were most attracted to this idea of making these small movies that we had a lot more control over from, start to finish. And though they weren't, the 30-second sound bites that were being done in the commercial division, or the shots that were being done for this kind of 2-hour experience, we're making the full movie in 3 to 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And we needed to get a story across, and you had the ability to go a little bit deeper at the same time you can't go as deep as you do. So it was just a different convention of storytelling that we both gravitated to because of our backgrounds. We can talk about that too. And we just loved it so much, we started a studio, and then now here we are 20 odd years later. Won't get into the specifics on that, but still doing it. And as Dina mentioned, doing now the creative development. We've been doing that for over 10 years now, where people come to us with basically a foundation, and they say, what can we do with this spot in our park, in our museum, in our aquarium, in our mall, on our pier, on our beach? It could be anywhere. And they come to us to kind of fill that out with what is the best experience for the guest using their location. So we've had
I just want to go back for 1 minute, because we all know what we're talking about, right? But what we're really talking about are 4D or 3D, 4D dark rides, which is actually putting the audience or the participant, or the guest, into the experience. And so can you just talk a little bit about that? And then, Allison, if it's okay with you, we have a 5-minute reel that runs the gamut of the experience of their work and their innovation. So as an intro, can you explain what a 4D dark ride is?
Well, yeah, and it's not just, I would say, dark rides, because that's a very specific type of attraction in the world of attractions. But we do immersive media-based attractions. So if you go into Universal and ride a Spider-Man or Disney and you've done a soaring, that's the kind of big media-based attraction that Super78 specializes in. So anything that you see in a theme park that blends media, ride systems, set scenic, lights, effects, those are the kinds of attractions that Super78 specializes in. And then we take all of those ingredients, and like master chefs, we mix them all up and we make different little, different meals out of those ingredients.
Yeah, and for the guest, it's a very seamless experience, and they become, as you were saying, Allison, part of that experience. They become a character in the show, essentially.
And that's where the magic is.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Allison.
I was going to say, that's where the magic is, right?
Yeah.
One of my questions always is, when anything I'm brought into a new project, how do you want people to feel at the end, right?
Exactly.
And that's that magic moment.
Well, I think you said it best, and I wrote it down because I think I'm going to just, steal it, because the great artists steal, right? Uplift the spirit, touch the heart, and fuel the mind. I mean, that's really what we're doing. When we think those are the ingredients that create successful attractions. If you can fuel the mind with just a little bit of information, you sneak it in there. You're always sneaking that in there. But that's what makes, that's like when you eat good food instead of cotton candy, and you eat some good food and you walk away and you don't feel bad afterwards, you feel good.
Yeah, right.
So if we can create something.
Tastes good.
Yeah, it tastes good, highly entertaining, tastes great, but it actually is good for you too. That is the winning combination right there.
Well, shall we have a little amuse-bouche then?
Sure.
All right, let's run the reel. a little stuck. We're back.
All right.
So I've got a question. When we look at the notion of telling stories in themed entertainment, at least the way I approach that is I always want to know the theme of whatever I'm working on. And oftentimes that's not very clear. Sometimes the client doesn't even really know what it is. But for me, it's really important to get to the theme or the heartbeat or the intention behind it, because I then would try to craft an experience to echo that theme. Is that how you would approach that too? And if it isn't, then how do you bring the thematic premise in to align with an experience?
That's a great question. And we approach them different ways, obviously, there's several constraints that you work under. Sometimes you're given a property, right? You're given an IP to work with. Sometimes it's a location that you're working with, right? And you need to fit with that location. And what we found over the years that, the constraint of your funding is directly related to how much you want to tap into the environment that your attraction's in to provide theme, right? So we're in the Pacific Northwest, we're on a pier, we're doing a flying film about flying over Washington. If we had all the money in the world, we could create any theme we want, right, in that location, because we can really transform the entire pier into a spaceship, and now you're loading up and, you can do whatever you want. If your funding is less, then you utilize the environment that surrounds you, that constraint, and you use that as a way to plus the theme or to give you that through line of the theme. So we went with Pacific Northwest, Native American, First Nations culture. How do we talk about the story of the Pacific Northwest and the intersection of, current culture in a flying film? We're flying over Seattle, we're flying over these major cities, and also these beautiful landmarks. And so we blended the culture of, First Nations peoples with this kind of modern contemporary maritime culture that they have. And we generated a theme from that. So really, that's part of it, right? You're always you're coming in with, what are my constraints, right? What do I have to work with, right? That's around me in my environment. What's our financial, right, situation that allows us to build out more and more elaborate, fantastic worlds, right? And also, am I using something that's already been established? Mm-hmm. That kind of covers, like, pretty much and that's the foundation. So that gives us, the kind of the board and the rules that we're working on. But you're absolutely right that theme is the most important driver, obviously, of a themed attraction. And that allows you to keep coming back to that theme. And if anybody gets off track, whether it's a client or me or,
never happens.
Never happens, right? You always know where to come back and get back on the road to, you can always come back to that theme.
And don't you think it works well when it's not put up front, like at least in terms of the guest, right? I always feel if it's presented as this is this thing and it, explores the theme of whatever it might be, you kind of kill the moment before you begin. And I feel it's nice that the theme sort of emerges in a very organic way as you travel through the experience. And sometimes people would walk away from that, perhaps not quite catching on to the real heart of that or what the theme is, but you kill it by saying what it is, don't you?
You absolutely.
Yeah, I think in the early days, I think the industry did that a lot. There were a lot of gimmicks and things like 3D and all of that. And as the industry evolved, I think it became a lot more of what you're talking about, which was, more of this unveiling itself throughout the story and a little bit more organic. to the
Yeah.
experience, because that makes it feel real. And that, then you're able to suspend that belief a lot easier.
Yeah, it's kind of like going into the pool and, either diving in, jumping in, where you're in the deep end. Here's all of the answers you need to know, or you kind of slowly acclimate into the experience. But it's also the layers and the depth that provide the more reality, right? So you don't tell the guest you're going on an undersea adventure with SpongeBob, right? You bring them into the world of, first you're on a wharf, now you're in a kind of a more of a cartoony wharf. Now you have people that, you start to bring in some of the elements. You see the sea creatures that are squids and sea sponges and sea stars, and then you move a little further. So you're bringing depth to the storytelling with, props and scenic and devices, all the devices at your disposal. And the more and more layers you can create, like you said, you don't necessarily pick up on, maybe 20%, but you buy into that world as you add depth to the world.
Before you know it, we need your help.
Yeah, right.
Can you help us on this journey? And then, sure enough, something might go terribly wrong.
Yeah, great. And you have to get...
Which is the convention, right? Yeah. And we could talk, the conventions of storytelling are different in every platform. So a convention in cinema, just like we were talking about earlier, convention in commercial, 30 seconds. This is what I need to get across in those 30 seconds. The conventions in our world are very different, and the storytelling always is. There is a moment of something goes horribly wrong, but that is the convention.
Well,
the timing of that.
I actually want to talk about the innovation, because Dina, you spoke of the evolution of the industry, and Super78 is actually leading that evolution. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, because you mentioned SpongeBob, so I wanted to talk a little bit about Geppetto and how this tool of storytelling came to be.
Oh, we're so excited about Geppetto, and it's been 12 years since we've had this technology. So it's the kind of thing where if it doesn't exist, then we create something like that. But in this case, we were we were challenged to create something that was unique in the industry, but following, I guess, one of our giants, Disney, that had something like this. But how do we do that, which doesn't infringe on, technology patents? So
the basis is it's a live, interactive character technology where a character can interact, an animated character can interact with a guest. So that's the basis of the technology, and we took
but
that.
This is in real time.
In real time.
So basically, the character that you've created is, if I'm a dad and my son is next to me, the character, you can actually see the audience. You can actually see what those children are doing or what those parents are doing, and you can interact live with that in the moment, correct?
Yeah,
yes.
character.
The animated character can talk.
Is alive. As much as the audience knows, as far as, especially when you're buying into these, because it certainly, follows the suspension of disbelief, right? So when we go into a movie, we are able to do that as humans. Storytelling allows us to suspend our disbelief and buy into these things. So when you go into a movie, you just buy into a movie. It's, okay, you're there. Same thing here, but now what we're doing is we're having these characters come to life, and as far as the guest knows, they are talking to Donkey from Shrek. They are talking to Patrick from SpongeBob, and they buy into it 100% that they are talking to the actual characters. And then there's a lot of magic that goes on behind the scenes, and a lot of development that we've done over the years to really create more and more immersive power around that character experience. But it's taking those things to the next level. And I think what we talked about earlier is being like, here's all the ingredients that we have. You know, how do we mix these ingredients up to serve you a new dish that is unexpected and magical?
It is so brilliant, and it's just one of the tools. And I wish we had time to talk about all the tools. For this segment, though, we're actually out of time. But when we come back in the next segment, we're going to talk about something that's very near and dear to your hearts, and something that got you into this business, and something because of your skills, your knowledge, and your backgrounds, you're able to preserve. So we'll see you in a bit.